Hello and welcome to Run My Arts watercolor tutorial series. So today I'm going to show you how to paint dandelions using very simple techniques in watercolor. I'm going to use Canson cold press watercolor paper, 300 grams per square meter, and the size is A5. So there are various methods on painting the dandelions. For example, you can paint the background first and then dropping in some water droplets or lifting out some paints, but I'm going to show you a different technique, a very simple one, and I'm going to use this tool as an assistant. Basically it's an egg holder. Actually you can use a simple lid or anything that has a circular shape. I just couldn't find a smaller size lid that could cater this painting size, which is why I went with the egg holder. So the first color that I'm going to use is a cool grey, and I'm mixing some sapphire blue with burnt sienna in order to achieve this color mix. If you have Payne's grey, you can use Payne's grey as well. So mix these two colors. Now what I'm going to do is to get the paint mix onto the lip of the egg holder, the rim part of the egg holder. So you will need a flat dish like this, similar to this, or a flat tray, so that you can lift the paint by placing the lid or the egg holder onto the mixed paint on the tray. But if you still find it difficult, then you can just use the brush, paint brush, and just stain the lip of the egg holder or your lid using the brush. And after staining it, I am just going to place the egg holder onto the dry paper. So I have not pre-wet the paper, it's a dry paper, and ta-da, the paint is definitely going to stain the paper in a form of the circle. So the stain doesn't necessarily have to be a very complete outline. It doesn't matter if there are gaps in between, because I'm just using this as an outline for the dandelions. So after staining it, I am using a wet brush just to drag those pigment towards the middle part of the dandelion's head. As you can see here, the moment it touches the wet brush, it just bleeds into the wet areas where you have sprayed the water with. And I'm going to repeat the same step by wetting the outer part of the ring or the circle, so that it bleeds on the outer part of the dandelion head as well, so that it looks smoother on the outside. So you can just keep softening these hard edges until you are happy with the look of it, as long as it doesn't appear very sharp, because dandelion has this soft bushy look, which is what I'm trying to achieve over here. And once done with the ring, I'm going to re-wet the middle part of the dandelion head, because I notice my paper is dried. But if you notice your paper is still wet, you don't have to re-wet it. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre with a hint of the grey mix, and just drop that paint using the tip of my brush, and you can see it bleeding easily since it's a pre-wet area. Next, I'm going to paint a second dandelion, and this time I am going to leave a gap on the lip of the egg holder. As you can see here, as I apply the paint, I'm leaving some gap. Though naturally this is a smooth surface, you will end up with some gaps, but I don't want to take any chances, so I'm leaving a gap before I press the egg holder onto the dry paper, just like what I did for the first dandelion, but with a gap. And I'm going to make sure the gap is facing upwards, which is the top part of the dandelion head. And do remember, this is once again done on a dry surface of the paper, so there's no pre-wet. And as you can see here, there is a gap that I mentioned. So once again, I'm using a wet brush to allow the wet paint to bleed towards the middle part. Using a brush you can have control on how you encourage the paint pigment to bleed towards the middle part, as well as on the outer part of the circle or the ring. So moving on, time to drop in the yellow ochre paint mix onto the middle part, and before doing so we have to ensure the middle part or the entire head of the dandelion head is wet, so it's a pre-wet surface. And just drop in that yellow ochre mix with a hint of the grey mix, and use the tip of a brush and slowly just touch the surface of your wet paper, and you will get this bloom of wet paint. Now that the painting is completely dry, it's time to make the second layer of painting. So once again I am back pre-wetting the head of the dandelion with some clean water. And for this time I am going to use my micro size brush, size 0. I'm going to use the same grey paint mix that I used earlier. So just dipping that micro brush bristle with the grey mix, and I'm just touching the wet surface of the dandelion randomly here and there, especially focusing on the white areas where there's not much paint. So basically these dark colored micro blooms inside this dandelion head is supposed to represent those individual seeds, dandelion seeds here and there. And now I am focused on the middle part of the dandelion head, where it looks more compact, if you noticed, a typical dandelion. So I think you know what I really mean. If there are some extra bleeding of the paint on the outer part of the dandelion head, it's okay. This would help the entire painting look more natural. And if you dislike the outline that I made earlier with the egg holder, you can skip that step totally and just start putting in those blooms. But I chose to make the outline first because I am really bad in making a good circle shaped painting, especially with watercolors. So I thought that outline could be helpful in proceeding with the second layer of painting. You can even make the outline, draw the outline using a pencil, but I just thought of skipping the entire sketching process. So just repeat the painting process for the second dandelion as well. So just pre-wet the area, the dandelion head once again, and then dropping in those grey colored tiny little blooms using the micro brush. And referring back to the gap that I left for this particular dandelion, so basically this is supposed to represent a blown dandelion where it has lost most of its seeds. So it doesn't have a very sharp outline, instead it's just those tiny little blooms. So while I wait for the entire painting to dry, I decided to paint some of those floating seeds from the dandelion head. So I'm using the same micro brush and the same grey mix to paint those seeds. And after painting these individual seeds, I'm just going to use a clean damp brush just to give them some light washes. Brush over those painted seeds and you can see them bleeding further and resulting in a very softer look, similar to a dandelion seed. So to paint the stem of the dandelion, I am using olive green yellowish shade. I'm also dropping in a hint of the same grey mix just to have that hint of dark, dull looking green shade. Just using my rigger brush to paint a basic looking stem, nothing special. So after painting the stem, I am just going to soften the ones that are inside the head of the dandelion by using my clean damp brush to soften its edges so that it appears more softer since it is inside a medium, which is the dandelion seeds, compared to the outer stem. So just repeat the same painting process for the second dandelion. So for this stage, I am going to start painting the details of the dandelion head, and I'm using the same micro brush that I used earlier as well as the same cool grey mix. As you can see here, I'm just making some brush strokes to indicate the stalks of the seed, or I don't know what is it called. Basically, I'm painting wet paint onto the dry surface of the painting. So as I paint the seeds, I am also remembering to paint some leaves underneath the dandelion head. So you want to extend the same paint mix onto the bottom part of the dandelion where the stem meets the head. And once done, I am just brushing over the middle part of the seed stalks that I made earlier with the clean damp brush just to soften its look, as I felt that it looked a bit sharp at this point of time. So if you want to soften its look, as usual, just brush over the painted area with a clean damp brush. So moving on, I am going to paint the individual seeds inside the dandelion's head. As you can see here, I'm using the same micro brush and the same grey paint mix, just randomly painting the seeds. And this time I am not going to give them washes using a damp brush. Instead, I want them to look sharp. So just be casual while you paint the individual seeds, especially try to paint them on the outer corner of the dandelion head so that it looks more natural instead of appearing very symmetrical, and avoiding very rounded edge. More floating seeds here and there But this time I'm just going to leave it once I've painted them, instead of brushing them with a clean damp brush. Some paint spatters to finish up this entire painting, and I'm using my fan brush. You can use an old toothbrush to achieve the same effect of spatters. Of course, you can't really see it on the screen because it's quite micro. A little bit of water spritz to enable the micro spatters to bleed in further. I think now you'll be able to see those spatters. For bigger paint spatters, I'm using a rigger brush. And with this, the painting is complete, and just a simple sign off on my painting. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, then don't forget to hit the like button as well as share it with your family and friends. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, do subscribe to my channel, and thanks a lot for your support. See you again in another tutorial. Bye.